So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the next panel. My name's Jane Thomason. I'm from Apt Associates. We're very interested in disruptive technologies and government. We're also very interested in working on disruptive technologies and as they impact on the lives of the poor, thinking very much about the bottom billion. So just addressing the question that came from the gentleman from India, we've recently completed a use case trial of a device that will take a digital identity without electricity, without a smartphone, and without internet. It will also trade off-grid solar power, and it will also send and receive money. So, you know, we're trying to think about those opportunities. It is a very extraordinary time in the world with disruption, and a number of people have spoken about inequality, and I think technology, if used right, is actually going to be able to reduce inequality and really help countries who still have numbers of the population living in poverty. And digital penetration is rapidly increasing, mobile technology is rapidly increasing, so there are many opportunities to reach poor and disadvantaged groups that were never there before. I'm really excited to be on this panel with both Estonia and Indonesia. Estonia because it's the country that we've all read about. It's the most advanced digital nation in the world, and I think we're all fascinated to hear how they did it, how they made it happen, how they overcame the challenges in government, and what it's doing in terms of making the lives for their citizens better. I'm also really happy to be here with the representative from Indonesia because we're working in Indonesia with the Indonesian government on a very large governance program, and we have opportunity for innovation and technology in that program. So I'm really thrilled to be with the representative of the advisor to the Bappenas, the Central Planning Agency here. So I would like first to invite Danang Rizky Ginanjar from Indonesia to come and talk to us about the experience of Indonesia, and that will be followed by Ivar Tallo from the e-Governance Academy in Estonia, and then we have an opportunity to discuss with them comparing and contrasting experiences and taking questions from the floor. So I'm not sure who my panellists are, but Pat, can you please come up? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Jane Thompson. First of all, everyone, disruptive technology in the context of emerging economies such as Indonesia, from disruption to opportunity. How to practice? Sorry, emerging economies. So. Okay. First of all, hello everyone. My name is Danang Ginanjar. I know it's difficult, so just call me Dan. And I love bridging public sector with emerging technology in Indonesia. Let's start with a very basic question. What is disruptive technology? Based on Christensen, when new technology arises, disruption theory can guide strategic choices. Based on that, technology will have two dimensions. The first of all is sustaining, improve the already established practices. And the second is disruptive, new, unproven, changing the previous established ways in a different method. For example, maybe this is very basic in modern technology like Estonia, but in Indonesia, even emails can change the way we used to communicate. Indonesia is the greatest archipelago countries more than 17,000 of island. So we used to have the postal services everywhere. So because of emails, it disrupt our communication, and we used to send greeting cards each Lebaran or each Christmas. But right now, even the simple things changing. Disruptive technology may or may not lead to progress or betterment, but it always leads to changes. I will start from the utilization of in public sector. Indonesia, following a total public sector reform movement starting in 1998, our government implement decentralization since 2000. And there's three main waves of public sector reform in Indonesia. The first wave is the post-crisis response, devolution and transparency. It creates democratization and decentralization. The second wave is consolidation of the reformation, the command and control of the government. It marked by bureaucracy reform, state as a first priority in national long-term development plan. And the third wave is looking to move beyond the reformation, the wider reformation itself. It marked by the new civil service law. And the government acknowledged that the public needs are evolving, public behavior is changing, economic transform, and business as usual is no longer suited to cope with the challenges. So, changes in public behavior drive changes in their values and expectation. If technology changes the public sector, then the authorities must be ready to utilize technology to keep up with the changes. It means opportunity for disruptive technology utilization on our public sector. And how to innovate or to facilitate an environment to grow innovation. We believe that disruptive technology for government will improve effectiveness and efficiency of public services and also improve the most important thing, transparency. For the example of leapfrogging that mentioned before, what about the current implementation in Indonesia? First of all, Jakarta. In Jakarta, we have Jakarta Smart City, the spearheading data-driven development in all sectors, particularly in transportation. We also have Clue. Clue is as public complaint and more handling mechanism. And also, the Jakarta government encourage local agency to have new innovation every year. The other major city is Surabaya. We have Surabaya Command Center, and also there's maybe even only single line for an emergency already disrupt our government. Maybe in the developed countries, 911 is very basic, but in our country, we just started there. And not only in the major cities such as Jakarta, Surabaya, and Bandung, but also in the other smaller region such as Bojonegoro. Bojonegoro, one of the regions selected for open government partnership, subnational government pilot program. And also they advance implementation of good government principle, particularly in transparency, participation, and openness. Various innovation from their local agency every year. This is one of the example that Bojonegoro receives an open government partnership reform in the world stage. And the last one, can disruptive technology help Indonesia SDGs ambition? Yes, we can use this new technology to measure the indicators of SDGs. Tier 1, the new ways to increase performance of target with clear or established indicator, or maybe to advance the tier 2, the new ways to increase performance or of target with unclear indicator, or maybe tier 2 and tier 3, we can create the formulate the new indicator or new ways to measure tier 2 and tier 3 indicators for SDGs. So that's maybe very basic information about how to give this disruptive technology and implement this technology in our country. But we hope we can learn something in this conference from developed countries and how to start, how to use even the basic technology for the government or for public sector. Thank you so much and have a good conference.
Thank you very much, Danang. And I would just like to heartily agree with you. I think that technology is going to be able to help not only to measure the SDGs, but also to significantly accelerate improvements in women's and children's health, in climate change with green prosperity, green power trading that's possible now, in terms of supply chains and provenance for medical supplies, and banking for the unbanked, so financial inclusion in a number of countries. So there's a lot of areas that technology is going to be able to, if countries harness it, help them achieve the SDGs. So I'll now go to our second speaker so that we can have an interactive discussion after both presentations. So I would like to invite Ivar Tallo from Estonia to talk to us about how Estonia achieved the remarkable. Thank you.
Hello. Excellency colleagues, it's a pleasure to be here and talk to you about this. And it's kind of really weird to listen to Estonia mentioned so much. I mean, when I created e-Governance Academy 15 years ago, then I remember how difficult it was to convince people that we have achieved something remarkable. I mean, we were told like, what? You are a former Soviet republic, and part of it why we wanted to do what we did was to get rid of this kind of names. But let me just make a short kind of historical trip back in the memory lanes. I started to deal with these issues more than 25 years ago. When I was a graduate student at McGill University, and my professors were telling me that, look, this is voodoo. You don't want to be Alvin Toffler. We are here a proper institution of higher education. Nevertheless, I've spent actually all my life ever since mostly dealing with e-governance in different forms. So there are two kind of things from the previous talks. I mean, whether we are going in the kind of linear way, you know, the mindset, or it is circular somewhat, how do we feel the time? With UNDP, it's interesting. Somebody mentioned before the 2001 report on how the technologies influence the change. In 2003, 2005, there were two very interesting global events, World Summits of Information Society. I got inspired of them. I mean, I thought it was great what they are doing. So I joined the UN in 2007 and tried to push also this agenda, but it really didn't work. So I'm very happy that UNDP has now really taken up the challenge. But not speaking about that anymore, let me start with what Estonia did and why. And I'm concentrating, I mean, the Prime Minister who was here before probably told you about the last flowers, what we've been doing, but I talk to you more about how we started, and I think it gives some clues, better clues maybe, to understand what we have done. Estonia, very small country, Nordic neighborhood, former Soviet Republic, yes, but member of European Union and NATO since 2004. And when we started, there was technology question. I come actually from the government question. So I always like to tell people that, well, yes, technology is important, but governance is even more important. And why it is important when we think about the governance, we think about how we I mean, what is the essence there? And the essence is that we as human beings, as some kind of community, we communicate. So there was 1950, so even more years ago, a professor of Toronto University, Harold Innis. Most people never heard of him. He wrote a book called Empire and Communications. And he showed throughout the human history how changes in the communication patterns have been causing changes in the government. So that was my topic of thesis, and I've been working on this ever since. I think that the greatest sort of impact of what happened was not the big mainframe computers and all this. I mean, yes, historically they were maybe more of a milestone, but for the purposes of this kind of disruption, it was this IBM 2 from 1987, so exactly 30 years ago. This was the first mass-produced computer that was accessible to everyone. It was $1,000, and the company started to buy it for their workers to ease the way the work was done and organized. And well, that led later to these questions, okay, but if we deploy them in government, what will happen then? And now we know. There are a couple of little movies that you can look. I guess slides will be shared. I'm not going to show them here just in order to keep the time. But, oops, do we go on now somehow? Yes. Let me go to the beginnings of Estonia. That is again about 20 years ago. And I'm happy to say that I was at outset, I mean, I was a young graduate from Canada going back to Estonia. I was asked to create the Estonian government strategy on information society, and I was kind of very hesitant. I thought that we can't really look into the future as human beings by definition. What we could do is to maintain some of the principles that we must follow, and some frameworks that we can put into place in government. Sorry, and it seems to have worked. But we started with a tiger leap. I mean, we were fascinated by the Far Eastern, Singaporean, Malaysian, all these experiences. And we said, well, we want something like that too. And Estonia was a very poor country at that time. I think it was about $2,500 per capita income. Now it is around 20,000. So we have made the tiger leap in these times. But the beginning, why it was important, why it was interesting, we started from really two areas which were defined in these basic principles. I mean, there is enormous change throughout the society. We said, okay, for the government, we'll have two sort of priorities. One was e-government, and another was education. Usually at that time, when you talked about new technologies, then it was higher education that had them and experimented with them and so on. What we did differently was we introduced them into the schools. We said in 1997 to 1999, in 3 years, we would equip all schools with computer classes. We will connect them to internet. and we did that. And that was a government investment. It was expensive investment for us at the time. We didn't get any donor money because everybody thought we are crazy. Our own people thought we are crazy because teacher salary was at that time about $100 a month, and the computer at the time costed about $1,000 a month. So the teachers didn't really want to touch the computers. They said, look, what if I break it? I mean, do I go to jail? I mean, I can't pay back anytime. Or if, look, this is expensive equipment, we haven't yet repaired the school roof. So let's first repair the school roof so then we can put the expensive equipment in. Or if you have money, why don't you raise my salary so I can smile to the students a little bit and fix my teeth maybe? But we actually maintained that, no, guys, we have to do it with the students, regular students at school. And what turned out to be, I mean, there were multiple benefits. First, I mean, let me say, I was also in politics for a while, so I'm not shy to say that politicians sometimes say things that they don't really follow up in the budgetary process and so on. But, you know, people realize that about politicians, so they don't take politicians too seriously. But if your own child, your neighbor's child, your brother's child comes back from school and says, Papi, something has been changing. There are these kind of things as computers, internet, and whatsoever. That is much better message than any message as mass media can produce. So we had this kind of message of change that reverberated throughout the society. Plus, when the students graduated, they already had the means to actually attend the new technologies. They could work with computers and subsequently got much better salaries. And well, we had societal problems because of that, because children had higher salaries than their parents, but well, that was an easier problem to deal with than other. But just throughout this timeline, this we started in '99. In 2001, 2002, we did something which was really interesting and innovative, I think. Public-private partnership in form, actually, it was basically paid by the banks and the telcos. We educated 107,000 people, which is not that much, but still quite a large number. But it was 1/10 of adult Estonian population, and we educated them to really use computers. And we didn't use any public money. It was all done by the private sector because they saw an opportunity. And we repeated that later with the use of digital signature and digital identity. I mean, this tree shows different things. We launched tax in 2000, mobile parking in 2000. We started interoperability in 2003, etc. I mean, there have been this growth of different things. It wasn't really pre-planned. I remember in 96, 97, when I was reading this Malaysian big strategy for 2020, I thought, well, we can never do this. I mean, to plan this far ahead. We are just a society in transition. So I'm sure Malaysians will live in 2020 also in information society, but we got there maybe before. But what is important is kind of the messages as governments that you reflect to the others. So on the left side, you see there was a paperless office. I mean, the G7 was talking about it in 1995, but they never did. When the leaders went back home, their civil servants said, stop, this is not possible. So it wasn't implemented. Our civil servants didn't know that you can say that to politicians. So they said, well, okay, if it is necessary to do, we'll do it. So the modern version is, a little bit more modern version is on the right side. But I mean, it showed a message. The ministers themselves start the change. I mean, the politicians have started the change. And you reflect it to both to your civil service, to your society, and to others as well. So what we did, I mean, basically, what I'm preaching around the world, it's kind of creating e-government infrastructure. Consists of 4 pillars. One is access. You really need access. I mean, not in Singapore, everybody has it, but in places where there is no access. Then there is a digital data that you need, and mostly the data collected today is digital anyway, so it's a question of how it is organized. Then what you need is interoperability, a possibility to reuse the data that has been collected already, and then fourth is digital identity. So with these 4 pillars in place, it is easy to reach this kind of society where you can put E or M or X or whatever I in front of everything. And what it really means is that all these institutions are connected to each other, and that it is possible to exchange data throughout that society. And one of these kind of key enablers that we stress and we try to influence, and now I think Singapore is also taking kind of a serious look, is to have the electronic identity or digital identity, that in this digital world you can actually tell that it is me. I mean, to the government, to the bank, to anybody, that, well, this is me who is knocking on your door trying to get the service or doing something like that. And well, let me show in this spirit of this how the public service will be disrupted. What happened in 1990s with these IBM computers was that nothing much changed for the citizen, but the back offices were connected for the officials. Then in 2000s, the first decade, usually people were talking about one-stop shop approach. So you go to one place, one office, and then you get all the services. We in Estonia somehow jumped over that. It was partly our oversight, I guess. What we thought was, well, if we have computers, if we have the ability to communicate, then why don't we communicate with the back office directly? And we started to build the systems that connect with the back office directly, and that is why probably a lot of people are talking about us now. But let me just finish with a couple of thoughts that have become clear throughout this journey that we've taken. Well, time, this is Salvador Dalí picture I used to have in my hotel, in my dormitory room. Time is of essence. Look, no change happens overnight in this kind of, in today's world. I mean, in historical perspective, yes, it is a very short time that we have had, but let's say when we started to pay taxes online, it was 9% first year, 21% second year, 30% third year. I mean, this is not what you call a big success story. But now, about 98%, it is a success story, clearly. But it took 10 years, and the Georgian representative was just talking before that it is kind of the political life cycle that you have is 4 or 5 years. So how do you maintain the kind of support in this process so that things can happen? Same like with internet voting. Look, we started with 2% of people voting. Now it is about 33% of voting on internet. And again, we jumped over. We don't have these big electronic machines to punch the numbers. We are using just everyday mobile phones or your computers connected to internet to do the voting. And it is very convenient, I can tell you. So the driving forces: leadership, political will, fixed political principles, PPP, public-private partnerships, supporting legal frameworks, and interoperable ICT architecture, I would say. And when you want to look at the Estonia, there are lots of sites. You can talk to me also. Thank you very much.
If I could just ask both our speakers to join me up here. Thank you for a really stimulating presentation. And I think all of us should think of Estonia as the global digital lab. So for all of the other countries here, here's this place that you can go and see that only has about 1 million people, if I'm not wrong. So for India and Indonesia, you've got a much bigger scaling problem, but you can learn from the process that they went through. And I took away a few points. The first one was getting that tech education in schools early. So you're educating your children for the future and to have the vision for the future and to influence the adults. The second one was you've got to get your politicians leading the charge and understanding what digital can do for them. So the question I think that I'm going to put to both the panellists is how you get that engagement with the politicians. The third one was around identity and interoperability. Without identity and without interoperability, doing this on a large scale isn't going to work. And then finally, I think the PPP example was brilliant because government's always saying who's paying for this, and what we've just heard from Estonia was that they did all of that training and it was paid for by the telcos and the banks. So what a great idea for everyone. So let me start first by asking both of the panellists to talk about how they see they could engage their political cadre in both understanding what technology can do and then driving it in their economies, because not all of us are going to be able to set up something spectacular like they have in Dubai, although perhaps next year we should have this conference in Dubai and go and have a look at that future lab that they had. So perhaps if I can put that question to the speakers and then we'll open it to the floor. So maybe, because Estonia, you did it, how did you get your politicians interested?
Well, it's never the case that all politicians are interested. It's always the case that some politicians are interested. So you work with those politicians or you become one yourself as also a possibility. So there is no magic kind of thing in that. And what is sad from the public services perspective, most of the modernizers will not be welcome in their own countries afterwards for quite a while, and only some decade or two later they will be recognized as having this kind of thoughts. So it is not really the road without dangers. Thank you.
Thank you. Pat?
As per we speak right now, our president, Mr. Jokowi, just opened the ID Byte. It's Indonesian conference, not only conference, but also like incubation for the youngsters, for the teenagers, to create like startups or technological training and everything. So I think in Indonesia, we already engage, and many people already realize that. But the thing is, we also have challenges, like our region is very spread, very huge in terms of the regional, not to mention many province, and also one of the island to the other island is very far away. So in terms of how to spread the engagement to other region, we still have we need to improve. Even the government, like the central government, is already made many effort to engage with this new technology and new era.
Yeah, thank you very much. And just for your information, and perhaps the audiences, together with Pulse Lab Jakarta about a month ago, we had a blockchain seminar with the Bappenas Poverty Directorate talking about how blockchain is going to be able to help them with identity and financial inclusion. So people are certainly thinking about it, but obviously it's a much bigger country to scale in. So let's take some questions from the floor. The mics are in both of the aisleways, so if you've got a question, can you make your way to the mic?
Hi, I'm Danny. I'm the Program Director at CPI, the Centre for Public Impact. I have one question on the Estonian example, which is, doing this sounds eminently sensible and we all love technology, and so therefore, why not? But is there evidence that it's actually improved outcomes for citizens, or what outcomes have been improved for citizens?
I think yes. I mean, we are pretty bad at actually producing studies, but if you want to sort of come and help us, we'll be happy to welcome you. But just on the sort of, well, first of all, I think I said that our income, average income has risen about 8 times in 10 years or 15 years. So it is pretty good, I would say, return. And what part of it is now from the new technologies, I can't say exactly, but I mean, it creates this kind of air of innovation. I mean, you all know Skype, and the engineers for Skype came from Estonia. The business and the business managers and the capital came from outside, but the technology was prepared by us. Just on the personal experience, I mean, I couldn't have done what I did throughout my life without these new technologies. I voted in parliamentary elections in 2007, I believe. I was in China, in Kunming, on a seminar like this. I voted from there. 2009, I think I was in Haiti, Port-au-Prince. I voted from there. You know, every time I'm doing, I mean, I don't remember when I went to the bank last time, but we started with electronic banking already back in 1990s. So, and I remember my father telling me initially that, oh, how can your son trust these kind of things to electrons? And I said, well, never mind that, I don't have to convince you, and I didn't. But some 5 years later, he once came to my house and asked, well, if he could use a computer, and then when I offered him a tea, and then he came upstairs to have a tea, and I said, well, what did you do? And he said, oh, I did some electronic banking. And I said, Dad, some 5 years ago you told me that you are never going to trust your money to this thing. And Dad said, well, I might be old, I'm not stupid, it's so convenient. So if you make the technology raise conveniences in your life, then people are using it. That's a lesson. If you are making people's lives more complicated, they won't use it. And I mean, one thing that maybe from the previous kind of discussion that we had also, I mean, we are addressing here the government. We are addressing here the spheres of education. These are some human institutions that we have created to actually keep what is good. So there are tensions, inherent tensions. Most of us are inherently conservative, even if we are kind of progressives in outlook trying to think about this. But I mean, there is a need to keep what is good and then prepare for what is coming eventually. So.
Thank you. I think that's a great comment, and I just wanted to share with you, because it was mentioned earlier how much time bureaucrats spend signing pieces of paper. I read something recently that said just the average citizen, if they had a digital signature, would save a week a year. So can you imagine how much time you as government bureaucrats would save if you didn't have to sign all those pieces of paper? I'm very conscious that we're coming towards the end of the session. I just wanted to see if there were any more questions in the audience, or I'm going to ask a final question for both of the speakers. So what I wanted to throw to the speakers was, you know, I think some of the challenges in the uptake and scaling of technology, one is going to be this engagement and education and knowledge, both of government, politicians and children, and developing the skills for people to be able to build and scale the technology. The second one that I think for government is getting due diligence done on the solutions, because there's so much technology out there these days. People are developing new apps on a daily basis. You know, how do you know which are the ones you can actually work with and that you can scale? The third one is, what are the financial models for scaling when you're looking at building big technology and scaling it in government. And I think we've got a long way to go to figure those out. But that's just kind of my takeaways. But I'd really like to ask each of the speakers what they see the key challenges are to get large uptake of technology to make for better, faster, secure, more transparent and efficient government, which allows them to connect easily with their citizens and improve economic growth and improve citizens' experience with government services. So perhaps, Danang, I can ask you first.
Sure. First of all, I just want to say to everyone here, we still use paper. So we still sign on paper. So there's many opportunity that we can develop in Indonesia. And right now, in terms of interoperability, we still ongoing progress to make one regulation about one data policies. So one data, even if everyone here asks me how many cows in Indonesia, so this department say, let's say 100,000, and the other department say 100 million. So how many cows in Indonesia, we still don't know. So in terms of that sense, many homework that we need to build in our country. So start from the regulation and then go to another level of, let's say, how to promote the technology and how to use the technology in not only in government but also in our lives.
Thanks so much. Ivar.
Okay, large uptake challenge. Well, I think everything at the end of the day will be mitigated through time, that I said before. I mean, you need time. There are no killer applications. I mean, the consultants, the technology industry, they all want to tell you, oh, let's find the new killer application and everything will be all right, and the happiness will arrive to your doorsteps immediately. Well, it won't. Let me tell you, I haven't seen in the 25 years that I've been devoting my life to this any killer applications. That doesn't mean that the governments don't have a role to play. They do, but to a large degree, and that is a second part of the sort of answer I didn't give to the last question, what the politicians should do. I mean, there are always some enthusiast politicians, but the other ones shouldn't really interfere and mess things up. That is one of the kind of thing. So let the things that grow. At the same time, what is important and what always has been a task for the sort of government is to defend us from the threats, identify the threats. And I'm not talking about cybersecurity as sort of a concrete threat question. I'm talking more general, to look into the new technologies and think, okay, could they present could they present threats to us or not? And let me say, I think the really large question about it is about data protection issues. And the questions that the new social networks present. I mean, I can very well see that the governments in some ways will become outdated when the social networks will get the ability to collect taxes. I mean, collect money in a very easy way. Then they can just replace the government as we know, I mean, today. But the regulations of these are not really done yet. We haven't thought this through, and that's why I really like events like this. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much. So that's a very big agenda for the next day and a half, and we now have the whole future of governments in question. So I'll leave you to ponder that. Please put your hands together for our two terrific speakers. And I'll hand it back to you for lunch.